what I want to talk about now, or not me, but our next presenter is really an interesting topic. When we think about information, right? When we think about what information is there for, it's really all about sharing, right? Information is always meant to be shared. When you think about when you're creating something, a Word document, a PowerPoint presentation, and so on, it's there to be shared with other people, right? There's no point in creating something just for yourself. And so we have this natural tension of we want to be able to share something, but what happens when we share it? So our next presenter is a guy called Patrick Heim, who I've known for many years now. He's used to be at McKesson, at Kaiser Permanente, in leadership roles in cybersecurity. Most recently, he was the Chief Trust Officer at Salesforce, and now he's the Chief Trust Officer at Dropbox, and he's going to come talk to us about security versus collaboration. Come on up here.
Theme music.
I know,
awesome.
theme music. There you go, and here's your clicker.
I'm going to keep it a little bit more. This is a hard act to follow, by the way, and go EFF. I love the arguments here. I'm going to keep it a little bit more lighthearted on this, because I want to focus on something that we don't often talk about, which is people. So, waiting for this slide. Nope, hold on. User error. There we go. So I did a little research, and there's this guy named Rafiq Rehman who puts together what he calls the CISO mind map. And yes, I expect you to read every word on this thing, of course. No, it's designed to be like one of these crazy spaghetti diagrams to make you think, what the fuck, okay. And what's really interesting is this is an old one. Since then, if you go on his website, he has other more extensive ones. And basically, the message is the problems that the CISO has to focus on are almost unbounded. And that basically puts most people in a position of, holy crap, you know, it's like, what do I need to focus on? It's very difficult to get the priorities right. But I actually sat down and I read this thing, and the reason I put it up here is not just because it's just chaotic for security leaders to figure out what they need to be investing their time on. There was also something critical that was missing here, which was the focus on people, the human dynamics, the behavioral side, which is something that over the last probably 5 or 6 years, I've come to really appreciate much more so than I had in the past. I used to be looking at problems and saying, these are technical problems to solve, but now the people dimension is becoming more and more important. And it kind of started when I was actually at Kaiser Permanente, and this is kind of like, I'm not going to anonymize the story, but this is a real story. I was sitting down with a physician one day, and we were discussing how do we tighten down access controls for an electronic health record system. And he goes, you don't get it, people are going to die. And I was like, okay, I've never been assaulted before and accused that I'm going to lead to somebody getting killed. But then I listened, and the reality was that the collaborative nature of healthcare doesn't make standard role-based access predictable. What I mean with that is that a physician may be rotating through an emergency room, and they have no idea who's going to come in. There's no pre-existing relationship that's there. They have never seen that physician before, and maybe the roles can be dynamically adjusted. But where he was going at is that the complexity of a healthcare environment is so great that the collaboration requires them to have much broader access, and because of that, if you try to put in artificial constraints, people can actually get harmed. So this was a real thing, and it really caused me to think around, well, okay, so what does this mean? You know, do I have to rethink how I apply security? And the answer is yes, because all of a sudden, there is a behavioral element that we have to factor in, which is how do people collaborate? Why do they do things the way they do? What enables them to do their job? And I like to look at usability and collaboration. They're almost in parallel. They're very, very close. And what we see is that when we get it wrong, bad stuff happens. And this, if you can read it, is basically saying 60% of users use the same password all over the place. In my work at Dropbox, you know, we protect the data of 500 million people across the world. And when I go out and advocate, I basically say the biggest problem I see is that with these people out there collaborating and working on files, they really don't know what the real risk is. Sometimes we get questions around, well, how do you encrypt and blah, blah, blah. The reality is like 99.9% of all of the actual breaches are a result of this right here, that individuals from a behavioral perspective take the easy path. Their minds are programmed to think that the online cyber world is like their house, where you can have one house key and it's okay to have the work across multiple locks. They haven't been trained, they don't understand, and they go the convenient route in order to achieve their objectives to get things done. And we have to take that into account as security professionals, because we need to be able to anticipate how individuals are going to react when we propose controls. And if we can't predict that, then it's not always obvious, by the way, then we need to run experiments. I'll give you an example around user behavior collaboration experiments that was totally non-intuitive. We ran an experiment at Dropbox to see what can we do to help solve the problem of ransomware. You know, ransomware encrypts your stuff, have to pay Bitcoin to get your files back. And we had a high fidelity way of just looking at metadata activity to identify whether somebody has been impacted by this. So we ran an experiment where we gave individuals, where we detected it, a notification saying that, hey, we have an indicator you've just been hit by ransomware. Please follow these following steps to roll back version history, undo the damage, and have a nice day. We've got your back. And what we actually saw was that there was a non-significant percentage of individuals that didn't read the stuff. And you know, there was one thing very clearly, it's like, don't close your account, you'll lose your version history, you can't undo the damage. And sure enough, there was a significant percentage of individuals, the first thing they did was like, holy crap, I'm going to shut down my Dropbox account, and they lost their data forever, unless they want to pay Bitcoin. So the reason I mention that story is because user behavior, especially at scale across organizations, isn't always intuitive from the reference frame of a security leader. There is a real area of discovery that has to happen to understand what motivates individuals, why do they do certain things. And unfortunately, I think, like I said in the prior diagram there in the mess, that element of human study and behavior, what influences people in a positive direction on security behavior, hasn't been done. There isn't much out there. Here's an interesting chart, another element around collaboration. We have data around companies that we've sold into and we've lost a deal to a competitor. And that's that time zero line right there, the vertical line. And we wanted to see what happens after we lose a deal to a competitor. Because Dropbox is known for usability, enablement of collaboration. And what we actually learned by doing this analysis, going 4 quarters out and 2 quarters back, is that users don't change their behavior one damn bit if the IT organization says, I'm going to buy a competitive solution and you're going to use this file storage solution instead of Dropbox. So that was a really powerful message for security and also IT leaders. And it reflects that we've had a change in the power dynamics around technology in organizations. It used to be that the IT organization can say, here's the approved portfolio stuff, please go use it. And people would. But nowadays, it came with the iPhone and mobility and the explosion and the growth of apps and what's available on the internet and cloud computing, that the power has shifted to the consumers in a very powerful way. And they are focused on collaboration. They're focused on ease of use. They're focused on enablement. So again, we need to rethink as security leaders, what does that mean? It means selecting products when we come up with a security portfolio that actually support usability, or at a very minimum that reduce the degradation of usability. I love the guys at Vera because I sat down with them several years ago and I got excited because you're philosophically aligned with Dropbox. You're looking at the user experience. You understand that if you don't get the usability side right, you're never going to get adoption anywhere. And the data proves that. It's out there. So, again, what does that mean? It's like we can think of ourselves as security officers. The traditional mode is the blocker. You know, it's like we're here to say no. But I actually think this is a very exciting time because this dynamic may not be understood by other parts of the business yet, or even by technology leaders. So I think there's an opportunity for security leaders to become enablers of the business. We can think differently. We can look for those win-win situations where we're improving security, we're improving the user experience, and we're doing it in a cost-effective way. I'll give another example. So back to that password problem, but password reuse. How do you tackle that? You can invest in single sign-on products and all kinds of things, but we've tried this as an experiment. Why don't we just buy a password vaulting product like LastPass or 1Password for all of our employees and give it to them and tell them to use it in their personal lives as well? And then let's monitor behavior. You know what? Low-cost investment, high rate of return from a risk reduction perspective, and as a security guy, people actually kind of like you because you just gave them something that makes their lives much easier and solves a big security problem. So those are the challenges I put out there to security leaders, which is think about this in a creative way. Look at it from a behavioral perspective. Don't always assume that just because you lock something down, you're going to get that security benefit. Your users will work around it if it's contrary to their drivers for ease of use and for collaboration. So lastly, that's really, I can always summarize it as the users are the perimeter. So even when we look at the attackers themselves, how have the attacks shifted? And almost every major breach you look at nowadays, if you decompose it, somewhere in that chain of consequence is user manipulation. It's phishing. It's something targeting an individual. So the user behavior side, clearly what's happened is like we've actually become much better as industries, especially the cloud industries, really rock solid on the technology component. So what do the bad guys do when you've amped up your investment in technology? They go after the individuals. So now more than ever, all the trends, all the data is showing that you need to invest in understanding the psychology, the behavior. You need to enable collaboration. You need to enable usability. That's the future of security. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you.